Hey guys, welcome back to another review video. Today's review is going to be for Octopath Traveler 2, available for the Nintendo Switch, the PlayStation 4, and the PC platforms. I recently finished playing through the game, and I wanted to give my thoughts on the game after completing the game. Now, keep in mind that the footage in the background for this review is from my stream playthrough of the game. The stream footage in the background is so that you know when I'm reviewing this game that I took the time to play through the game from beginning to end, and that I did actually play through the game before reviewing it. So with that being said, let's get right into the review for Octopath Traveler 2. Octopath Traveler 2 is a very unique RPG game. The game has a very different structure from other RPG games out there. In the game, there are 8 playable characters in the game. Each character has their own character story that you progress from beginning to end. And as you go through the game, each chapter of these character stories gets more and more difficult and requires your characters to be higher and higher in level. Because of this, at the beginning of the game, you choose a main character, and this character has to be in your party throughout the entire game. And then with that character, you go and you recruit the other 7 characters of the game. Then from there, you go through the character stories and you try to progress through all the character stories to the very end of their character story and try to beat all the character stories in the game. Then once you finish all 8 character stories, you get to the very end of the game, you fight the final boss, you beat the final boss, and then you're at the end of the game. Now let's talk a little bit more about the gameplay and the battles of the game and the exploration. So Octopath Traveler 2 is a turn-based RPG. This game has random encounters like old school RPG type of games. So you go into an area, you begin exploring, and after you take a few steps, it will then go into a battle, and it will transition to a battle screen where you battle the enemies. Now the turn-based combat of the game has you taking turns, and you can see a turn order so you can see what characters or enemies are going next in battle. One of the really cool things about the game is that the combat basically has a system where enemies have what are called shield points, and so they'll have like 3 shield points. If you hit their enemy weaknesses, which are like maybe they're weak to spears, and so you hit them with a spear attack 3 times to break their defense, they'll then enter a state called break, which is basically where their defense is broken and they take bonus damage from all attacks. And then you also have another feature in the battles which is called BP. BP stands for boost points, and you can use 1 boost point to boost a character 1 time. You can boost up to 4 times in 1 turn to make a move a lot stronger. Because of the BP feature of the combat and the shield point feature of the combat is a lot more strategic than some other battle systems out there. And the battle system is actually really good in Octopath Traveler 2. Eventually, once you defeat all enemies in battle, the battle will then end. You will then win the battle and be awarded EXP and then money in the game, which a currency in the game is called leaves. And then you also get JP, which are job points, which allow characters to learn job class abilities. Once a character gains enough EXP, they will level up and they will have their stats increase and they will become stronger. In addition to leveling to get stronger, you can also use money that you get from battles to go to stores in towns and buy more powerful weapons, armor, and items for your characters. Now, aside from leveling up with EXP and buying better weapons and armor, there's also another feature of the character customization in the game. This game, like some other RPG games out there, has a job class system. So throughout the game, you get the ability to set characters' job classes to different classes. Then what you can do from there is using the job class points that you gain from winning battles, you can spend those job class points on the character skills and learn the skills from that job class that they have and equip it on the character. Each character can equip up to 4 job class skills that they've learned. Now, I've said that the character customization system with the job class system is pretty good. I've said that the battles are really good, and that the character story system of the game is pretty interesting. So what are also some other good things about Octopath Traveler 2's gameplay? Well, another really good thing about the game are the boss fights. The boss fights in this game are incredibly good. Each boss fight is very different from one another. You might fight like one boss where they have the ability to change their weakness. And so to break their defense, you constantly have to use different attacks. Then meanwhile, another boss has the ability to make characters turn against each other. So in the middle of the battle, they'll take one of your characters and make a clone of them, and that character will start attacking your party. You have to defeat the clone to get that character back. So there's a lot of unique features in the boss fights like that make the boss fights really good. Now, as good as that sounds, what are some of the problems with Octopath Traveler 2 that makes this game have some serious problems? Well, there's two big flaws in the gameplay, in my opinion. So the first big flaw in the gameplay is that characters who are not in your battle party get no EXP. So you can have a party of up to 4 people to battle with, but the other 4 characters in the game who are not in your battle party get 0 EXP from all the battles those characters fight. And because this game has you playing different character scenarios and going back and forth between different character stories, this causes a huge problem. Because in a lot of these character stories, even if you have the other 3 characters leveled up and you only have 1 character who's under leveled, there's a lot of 1v1 battles in these character stories where you got to use that character. And if they're not high enough level, they're going to get killed and you're going to lose the boss fight or 1v1 battle that you got to do. So this is something where the game is very lacking. In my opinion, it's very outdated for a PlayStation 5 and Switch RPG that came out in 2023 for it to basically be set up in a way where characters not in battle get 0 EXP. And so what ends up happening is there's a big level gap between the characters you use the most and the characters you don't use as much. And because of this, in order to catch these characters up to the recommended levels of their later chapters, you often have to go to areas and you have to do tons of level grinding to catch those characters up in their levels to everybody else. And so this is a really big flaw that unfortunately brings the game down a little bit. And it's really a shame because, like I said, there's so many other good aspects of the gameplay. Now, the second big flaw I have with Octopath Traveler 2 that unfortunately is the area where the game is really lacking and is a big weak point in the game are the dungeons of the game. I talk about dungeons a lot in my reviews, but here I really got to mention it in Octopath Traveler 2. The dungeons in this game are some of the most basic and lacking dungeons I've ever seen in an RPG game. You'll literally go in a dungeon in this game, and the dungeon is 2 screens. It has 0 puzzles, and you get through the entire dungeon in like 5 minutes. And they try to jack the encounter rate up to make you get into battles really often, but once you get the ability evasive maneuvers that lowers the encounter rate, you can get through these dungeons in like 5 minutes, and they're literally only 2 screens long, and then you beat the whole dungeon and you're at the boss. The dungeons are way too basic, they're way too short, they have no puzzles, no creativity to them, and they're way too short. The dungeons are definitely the biggest flaw in this game, along with the game not giving EXP to characters not in battle. The dungeons are a major weakness of Octopath Traveler 2. Again, doesn't mean it ruins the entire game and that it's a bad game. No, it's still a game with a lot of really good things in it, but this is a big flaw where the game is lacking in this area and it brings the entire game down. So overall, I would say that's pretty much it for the gameplay. Next, I'm going to talk about the story. So I feel the story is going to be another area that's going to be hit and miss with people. And there are 8 different character stories in the game, like I said. I think most of the dialogue and the writing in the game was pretty good. And most of the character stories were very interesting. There was maybe 1 or 2 character stories in the game that I didn't care that much for personally. But overall, I liked most of the character stories in the game. And the characters were pretty well developed, and the dialogue was pretty well written. There was also some really cool plot twists in the game. Now, that being said, I'm going to kind of bring up something that could be viewed as neutral. Depending on the player, it's going to be good or bad. So Octopath Traveler 2, it's a very story-heavy game. So basically, you'll get to a character story, and the first 30 minutes of the character story is all back-to-back cutscenes, walking around talking to people, and watching story scenes and 0 battles or gameplay. And so if you're somebody who's not into long story scenes, this might make Octopath Traveler 2 not a game that you will enjoy. If you're somebody who you really value story in games, you might really then end up liking the emphasis on the story. And they actually listened to feedback from Octopath Traveler 1, and they put like a very final chapter that unlocks in the game after you beat all 8 of the character stories. Because one of the biggest complaints about Octopath 1 was that there was no real like story, final boss, or final chapter of the game. And so Square Enix and the developers of the game listened to player feedback, and they put in like this final story chapter of the game that kind of unites the character stories together, where you fight a real final boss to the story. And developers listening to player feedback and implementing player feedback and improving their games is always something that gets a big thumbs up for me. And so I gotta say, good job to Square Enix for basically implementing this into the game and putting like a very final chapter to the story of the game with a final boss to the story that unites the character stories. So overall, the story in Octopath Traveler 2 is really good. The dialogue is written well for the most part, the characters are very likable, and the dialogue is well written, and there's some interesting plot twists. The last thing I really want to cover with Octopath Traveler 2 is going to be the soundtrack. The battle themes are very good in the game, the area themes are incredibly good. I really think the soundtrack in this game was excellent. There are a lot of really great memorable songs, and the music is definitely a highlight of Octopath Traveler 2. So overall, what do I think about Octopath Traveler 2? Well, Octopath Traveler 2 is a good game, but the game has some flaws that prevent it from just barely making it into the must-play game territory. I think it's a good game, it has a lot of great strengths, but it also has some really big weaknesses that bring the game down. As always, I want to say a big thank you to everybody watching the video. I really greatly appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I would really greatly appreciate it. And also follow me over on Twitch at twitch.tv/Shockstorm. Thank you all so much for watching the video. I really greatly appreciate it. And I will catch you all in the next video. Thank you all so much.